Hello, parents and students. This may be for both of you. This is Mr. Heath, and what I wanted to do was go over the scoring rubric in our scorecard. Many times when you take an assessment, or if this is a parent, your child takes an assessment, I give them a scoring rubric. The reason why I provide scoring rubric, I think it's really important for students to look at their work, see their mistakes, talk about it, understand, build up from there. So the scoring rubric allows the student to look at their work, see what they need to do to earn a certain grade, and see if they've achieved that, and they can reflect upon it and say, I got to do this, I got to do that to be better. So right now I'm going to go over the elements of it. So this is the scoring rubric. This is a scorecard right here, and we'll get to that in a second. But the scoring rubric right here is based on computation, answer sentence, properties are excellent, but we're just worried about answer sentence. Naming a number, that's just labeling numbers, and then strategy. So let's talk about each one of these areas here. So if a child's doing computation, they would score 1 point of being an amateur if, 1, there was none or just too small of an amount of mathematical work written down. I kind of see myself as a doctor, and if I can get enough information, I can try to figure out a cure for what's happening. But if a student doesn't write anything, then it becomes very hard to figure out how to, provide remediation. So because of that, anytime they don't put enough where I can try to help them or assist them, they've only earned a 1 and they're amateur. So let's go on. Let's say how they earn a 2 or become an apprentice. So they do the computational work, but then the work is written unclear, it's not in logical order where I've got to try to figure out what's happening with it. Okay? Another way they can score an apprentice or a 2 is that the answer is incorrect. Let's say the answer was 1 and they put 2. That answer would be incorrect, they would earn a 2 there then. Another way is that they have multiple errors in the computation, so multiple errors in the computation, or they have a really big error in the computation, okay? And let's move over to where they would earn a junior expert. So junior expert, that'd be a 3 point out of 4. The work is written clearly and in logical order, okay? Another one is they have a correct answer. Everything's written in logical order, but there's some minor computational errors. But even in spite of those minor errors, they still get a score that they can work with. Also, they can earn a 3 where they can do all the work properly, be lined up clearly and logical and everything, but they don't simplify. Simplifying has been a challenge for students, so I'm trying to be gentle about that. By the time November comes up, I'm going to be holding the line on simplifying, okay? And let's say they were an expert in computation. Well, if they're an expert in computation, they have 1, the work written clearly in logical order, 2, there are no computational errors, and 3, the answer is correct. So you can kind of see straightforward how your child or you as a student could figure out, hey, was I amateur, was an apprentice, was I junior expert, was I expert when it came to just doing the computation part of the challenge. So let's go on to the next part where it says answer sentence. Actually, let me provide an example of computation that would earn you a 4 here. So let's get the student's paper here. Right here you can see where it says computation, and I have them write that in and put a rectangle around so it's easy. So look at that student's computation. A, B, C, D, laid out very nicely. So that student earned 4 points. They're an expert at doing the computation for this challenge. So let's move on. And of course then we would go here. I'm scoring the person, so I would put my name, Mr. Heath. And the person I'm scoring, let's say it's Miss Lopez. So Miss Lopez, she would have her first and last name. Okay, Fatima. Now I put that there. And the cohort that she's in, what is it? I think Badgers. Alright, so Badgers right there. So on their scorecard, they would have their first and last name, and they'd have their cohort, okay? The person that's scoring them would then put their name here. So I'm going to say I'm scoring Fatima, okay? So far at the student's work, what I saw, I would score them as a 4, and she would have her grade there already. Let's say she scored herself as a 4, so a 4, and I'll go behind her. And that's another thing about the scorecard and the scoring rubric. It allows students to score themselves, and then myself or one of their fellow students go behind them and score. So let's say that Miss Lopez says, hey, I scored myself a 4, 4, 4. Well, let's see if she's correct. So now we're going to move on to the answer sentence here. Let's talk about the answer sentence. Now, to earn an amateur in the answer sentence, you don't write down a sentence. There's just nothing I can talk to you about to figure out if you knew the correct way to speak what the answer was. Or you use the word it, they, there, etc., without anything to reference. So let's say like, I got it, and it was the answer. You notice where there's nothing I can refer to. But they say I got the quotient, which was 12, and it was the answer, then I know what they're referring to. So that's really important. We can't just say it. We got to know what the it is, and at least have a reference to it. All right, so that's how you would earn an amateur on this one. If you wrote down no answer sentence or use the word it, they, etc. with nothing to reference. Let's move on to apprentice. You would earn a 2 in apprentice on your answer sentence if you write down what we call computational tough. So let's say it's an answer that's real world, that you had, 1/8 of something and 2 1/2 of something. There was an answer, but you go, I multiplied 1/4 by 1/2 and got 1/8. You're not applying the real world conversation to it. You're just doing a computation talk. So anytime we have real world challenges, which is most of them, we want you to use the real world language. I had 1/2 ounce of this, and I had 1/8 of this thing, and together I had a total so many ounces of whatever. Okay, so that's the application there. All right, so then for our answer sentence, it says junior expert. Well, let's look for answer sentence when it comes to junior expert. Sentence does not reflect true understanding of what is being asked or accomplished. You may put down a sort of answer, but it doesn't really reflect that you know what the topic is. Let's say you put the answer is, the coconuts are 3. Well, that doesn't necessarily answer, because it should have been the coconuts were 3 for the price of 7 apples or whatever. You really didn't know. You put a partial answer or something that would just not really, it didn't really show that you understood what the answer truly meant. All right, so let's move on. And let's see the expert for when it comes to answer sentence. You have a simple, straightforward sentence that provides the correct answer in a clearly understandable manner. Here it is. I had a total of 3 inches of paper when I got done cutting them. Whatever it is in that situation. That is a very straightforward answer. I have 3 pounds of butter after I sold the rest of it. There you go, correct answer. So now let's take that. I will go to this scorecard. I will take a look at the answer sentence, and it says the old man will walk 3 1/5 miles in 1 hour. That's a perfect answer sentence that the student has right here. Okay, you can look at it. It doesn't have just numbers. It's explaining what the question was asking. How fast would he be in an hour? And so we'd go there. We'd score that as a 4. Let's move into our third component for scoring on the scoring rubric, and that is the name the number. Name the number, just make sure the students reference what the number, what the number is referring to in a sense. You just want to put 1/2. You want to say 1/2 and maybe it's butter, or 1/2 a cup of water or something, whatnot. So let's take a look here. So if you earned an amateur on the number, you didn't name any numbers. You didn't label any numbers. You didn't provide any names for these numbers. Or you wrote down labels for or names for the numbers, but they were incorrect labeling. So let's move over to the apprentice. You wrote down less than half of all the proper labels that need to be placed. So let's say they were 9, and then you got 4 correct labels out of 9. That's less than half. Then that student would earn a 2 in that situation. But let's go on to junior expert. It says more than half of the numbers labeled correctly, but not 100%. For junior expert, that just means that, let's say out of 9, you had 5 correct, or 6, but not the 9 out of the 9. You would earn a junior expert for naming and labeling those numbers. And last but not least, for the expert, the 4, you had all 100% of the numbers labeled correctly. Remember, not just labeled correctly. So once again, you can see. So let's take a look here at the student's paper. So I go here, thing, unit of measurement, type of number, unit of measurements, distance, time, miles, hour here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They have 9 of 9 correct, and so they have earned a 4. So let's go ahead and place a 4 here. And last but not least, let's take a look at strategy. Strategy is an important element of getting these answers correct here. So let's take a look at, and strategy just means that what way would you go ahead and attack this problem and try to find the correct answer. So you earned a 1 if you had no strategy written, or no strategies written at all. Or once again, you use it, and we have nothing to reference. or you don't include important sort of operational or topical vocabulary. So if it's relating to the topic and you don't include that, let's say it was about grams and you put ounces or something like that, or pounds and it was miles or whatever, then you would put incorrect one, or maybe you don't even list it, you say 10, it was 10 miles, whatnot. At that point, you're going to be listed as an amateur. Now let's go to apprentice for number 2. For 2 points, it says use the specific numbers in the strategy. What I mean by that is that the student will say, I multiplied 2 times 4, as opposed to saying I found the product of the 2 numbers. Why is this important? Because I don't want the students to think, you as a student or the parent listening, to think that it's 4 times 7. I want it to be something general where they say, I multiply the numbers together, I multiply the numbers in the numerator. I don't want them students to say, I multiply the 2 and the 7 in the numerator, because sometimes students become nervous if you use numbers or they have different numbers. So that's the reason why I don't want to use specific numbers. We want to use general mathematical terms when talking about them. All right, and it says provided one-word response for one or more of the strategy steps. Let's say you have a strategy step about dividing. You put reciprocal, multiply, simplify, as opposed to apply the reciprocal strategy, multiply the numerator with the numerator, or multiply all the numbers in the numerator together and multiply the numbers in the denominator together, and then simplify your quotient. So that would be something, if possible, that would be something that's not one word, and it allows you to get those points. Let's go over to junior expert. So junior expert, you're in a 3 there. It says one or more important elements of the strategy needed to find the correct answer is missing. So let's say that it's once again dividing fractions, and you say first divide, multiply, and you wouldn't do it. Let's put it the proper way. You say divide, and then you would say divide by finding, applying the quotient strategy, applying the reciprocal strategy. And then after that you would say, let's say you skip the multiplication, you go simplify possible. At that point you've earned a 3, because knowing to multiply in the numerator and the denominator is a really important thing. So that's the reason why you would get that point. Alright, so that's 3 points. Let's talk about the expert strategy. What the expert does, they write down 100% all of the correct important strategies needed to find the correct answer. Okay, so they have them all written down, every single strategy that and correctly. And so let's take a look at the strategy that this student used. So it's a strategy. I created a chart and labeled. I found the quotient by applying the reciprocal. I multiplied the numerators and I multiplied the denominators. Obviously I should have said numbers, but I know what they're saying. And then you put simplify possible. This is a 4 here. Why? All the major steps are there. They don't have one-word answers. So this is a 4. Correct answer. So we go here, let's say today's date. So I put October, so 10, and today is the 6th. So 10-6. Ms. Lopez has already scored herself, so she scored herself as a 16. What I do is verify in the 16 right there. At this point, I'm done doing my part scoring. She's done with her part scoring herself, and then we would get together and talk about, hey, I scored just a 4, and she would say, hey, I did too, and you would further have discussions about that. So that's the scorecard. That tells you how we kind of operate with many of our assessments in the classroom. So always refer to that if you have questions or issues about the scorecard. And of course, you can always reach out to me. But that gives you sort of an unedited, so it's not very clean video, but it's a video that kind of tells you what we do in our class in terms of how we score students and how they score each other. All right, this is Mr. Heath. Thank you for listening.